Hi, welcome. I want to talk some about what the oral presentation will be like this semester in Senior Sem. As you probably guessed, we're not going to be doing in-person oral presentations. So instead, we're going to be using Zoom to meet as a large group to complete oral presentations on Wednesday, May 6th at 3 o'clock. So we'll meet together in a large Zoom meeting with the entire class present as participants, as well as myself and Dr. Butcher. Some other faculty members will join us as participants for that Zoom meeting as well, as will your classmates, and then potentially some research method students as well. So we'll have a lot of participants in that Zoom meeting, and Dr. Butcher and I will host that Zoom meeting and sort of manage the flow and organization of that Zoom meeting. So I want to talk some about what you'll be doing in your teams to present during that Zoom meeting. So we'll be posting an order that you'll go in for your presentations. And essentially what you'll be doing is doing and replicating what you might do in front of the classroom in the Zoom meeting. So you'll prepare a PowerPoint presentation of your project, its findings, and your discussion. And I'll talk in a few minutes about what goes into that PowerPoint and how to create that and sort of how to create your oral presentation and what you'll cover. But essentially, you'll develop that PowerPoint, and then one member of your team will share your screen within Zoom and present your PowerPoint presentation. And while that person has their screen shared and you're presenting your PowerPoint presentation, each of you will give the oral presentation as you essentially narrate that presentation over that PowerPoint live in the Zoom meeting. So let me show you how that will work here in this Zoom video that I'm recording. So I'm going to share my screen and you can sort of see what I'm doing, and then you'll essentially be replicating this in our Zoom meeting for our oral presentations. So here I've shared my screen. As you can see, I'm within Canvas, but I can also bring up my PowerPoint file, and you can actually just share PowerPoint if you want to do that so people don't see your whole screen. And then I can play the presentation. And as you'll see, the video of me still shows up. So you can still see the video of me as I'm sharing my screen. And in fact, Zoom will automatically show the video of people who are talking. So as each individual on the team talks during the PowerPoint presentation, their video will also show up. So I'll begin the PowerPoint presentation, obviously, with a title. And again, I'll talk more in detail in a moment about what will go into the PowerPoint presentation. But you'll use PowerPoint to present. You'll kind of walk through your study, walk through the results of your study, and provide a presentation as you do that within Zoom. You'll see that within Zoom, there is a there will be a list of participants in sort of a in a box like this. So Dr. Butcher and I will be able to see a list of everyone present in the meeting, and you'll see this too. And there's also a chat feature here within Zoom. And we're going to give audience members a chance to ask questions using this chat feature. Dr. Butcher and I will monitor the questions that the audience has, and when you're done with your presentation, we will then present some of those questions that we think are really good questions to you and ask you those questions. So I might say something like, you know, Dr. Hennings has asked you to explain your graph in more detail, and he wants to know about these error bars. So then we will present those questions to you and probably present about 3 to 5 audience questions, kind of, you know, depending on the nature of the questions and sort of how long your answers are. Again, I'll provide more detail in a moment about how long the presentation will be and so on. So questions will be asked through the chat function, and we'll ask them of you. And then you'll spend a few minutes answering those questions. And then your presentation will be done. So let's talk some about what will go into the presentation. Well, actually, before I do that, just one note about Zoom if you haven't used it. If you go to the assignment on Canvas for the oral presentation, it's not there yet, but a link will show up here, and I'll send this out both in an announcement and an email to make sure you have it. There'll be a link that will show up here that you'll click on to enter the Zoom meeting for oral presentations. So many of you have probably used Zoom and already done this, but for those of you that haven't, there'll be a link for our specific oral presentation Zoom meeting that you'll use to access the meeting. It'll be best for you to access this on a computer rather than on your smartphone, especially if you're the one sharing the screen. I think it just makes the most sense to say you need to join this on a computer. I will say if you have or anticipate any difficulty joining the Zoom meeting or connecting at that time, please let Dr. Butchert and I know so we can sort of work through any of those issues ahead of time. We're both understanding that this is a unique, difficult, challenging situation. So we just ask that, if you anticipate that there might be any difficulties with connectivity, joining the meeting, having access to a computer, please let us know sooner rather than later, and we'll work with you to work through any of those issues. All right, so let's talk some about the presentation itself and what will go into that presentation. So I want to provide some guidelines for your oral presentation. Aim for about 7 to 8 minutes for your oral presentation. You'll begin the presentation as one of you shares your screen with an opening slide that displays the title of the screen and your names. I think it'll be best if you just begin by explaining why you ran the study you ran. So for example, I might begin this oral presentation with this example study that we've been talking about by saying, Dr. Butchert and I were interested in how instructors are evaluated. We both work as instructors, and we were wondering about the impact of these variables on how instructors perceive or how students perceive their instructors. So spend a few seconds sort of explaining why you were interested in the topic you were interested in, and then introduce yourselves as well, of course. Next, you'll provide an overview of the background information and literature. So essentially a slide or two summarizing the most important background and information from the introduction section of your paper. So think of this oral presentation essentially as you presenting your paper, the final paper that you're writing, and putting all of that into a visual medium in an oral presentation. So you'll probably have a few bullet points for important background information. So for example, if I was presenting for the study on the impact of instructor gender and attire on student evaluations, I might briefly summarize the important background literature on gender bias in student evaluations of instructors. And then I might also summarize some of the important background information and literature about how men and women are evaluated differently depending on what they're wearing in a variety of settings, for example, including in business settings. And I would present that information in a way that leads to, similarly to how you've done in your introduction, leads to the rationale for the present study and the hypotheses that we've developed for the study. So it'll be helpful to have a whole slide, for example, maybe where you talk about gaps in present research. So for example, I might have a slide with a few bullet points where I talk about how there hasn't been any research, for example, that's evaluated how attire for male and female instructors might impact student characteristics. Then you'll have a separate slide with your hypotheses where you clearly lay out each of your hypotheses before moving into the methods of your study. I think for some of you, it's going to be helpful to remind yourselves that the audience, that this is the first time the audience will be hearing about your study. So even though you are intimately familiar with the design and methods of your study, the audience is not. And this is the first time they're hearing this. So especially for those of you that have factorial designs or complex designs, it'll be really important to carefully and logically go through the methods and design of your project. Spend time, and this is where you can use the visual medium of a PowerPoint presentation to help you. Spend time talking about what your independent variable was and how you operationalized it and how you manipulated that to create the various conditions in your study. So for example, I could even show very brief clips in my PowerPoint presentation of the lectures that Dr. Butchert and I recorded in the different outfits that we were wearing for our study, and show that to participants as part of the PowerPoint presentation. Or maybe I could show screenshots from the videos that we recorded. There I'm using the visual medium of the oral presentation of PowerPoint as my friend to help me communicate how we created the conditions we created in the study. So very clearly lay out what the experience was like for a given participant. So I might, for example, say that in this study, participants came into the lab, they came into a classroom with other students, they sat down, they watched a video, maybe show some screenshots from the types of videos they saw, and so on. Then provide a detailed overview of the results. You're primarily going to display the results in a graph that you've created. The most important thing when you talk about the results in your oral presentation is to clearly, carefully, slowly, and comprehensively go through the graph that displays the main findings and results of your study. So this graph here displays the results of the pretend study here about student evaluations of instructors as a function of instructor attire and instructor gender identity. So rather than just like quickly showing your results and saying, here are our results, as you can see, they support our prediction, and then go into the next slide, spend time walking the audience through the graph that you display. And I think this is probably the single most important thing you can be sure to do in your oral presentation. So if I were presenting these results, here's what I would do. I would say something like this. Here's a graph displaying the main results of our study. As you can see in this graph here, the y-axis presents student evaluation ratings. As a reminder, these student evaluation ratings are the means across all items on the evaluations that students completed at the end of the lectures. And total scores for those evaluations ranged from 1, indicating that students evaluated the instruction poorly, to 5, indicating that students thought highly of the instruction. So again, low scores here represent poor evaluations, high scores represent strongly positive evaluations. As you can see here, for formally dressed instructors, regardless of the gender of those instructions, participants rated participants strongly positively responded to that instruction, with average ratings just above 4, again on this 1 to 5 scale. However, when instructors were dressed casually, a difference emerged between male and female instructors. For male instructors, when dressed casually, student evaluations were in line with how instructors, both male and female, were evaluated formally, with mean evaluation ratings around 4. However, for female instructors in casual attire, as you can see here, students evaluated those instructors significantly lower, with mean evaluation ratings just above 2. We ran a 2-way ANOVA, and there was a significant interaction, a significant attire gender interaction, such that for formally dressed instructors, there was no difference in instructor gender. However, for when instructors were dressed casually, there was a difference between male and female instructors, such that when dressed casually, male instructors were rated more positively than female instructors. So note here how I went through in detail. I went through this graph. I described the findings of the study and sort of summarized them, and then presented results in my statistical analysis. So you should do the same. Then state whether, as you move into the discussion part of your presentation, state whether your results fail to support the prediction that you made. As you're doing in the discussion section of your papers, discuss the implications of those results, possible explanations of your findings, and how your findings fit with existing research. Discuss the limitations of your study and your project. Think of those as threats to internal, external validity. End by summarizing the take-home message, and then you'll be fielding questions. Again, the way this will work is that one of you will share your screen, and then each individual will talk during the presentation. It'll be helpful if you aim to distribute the time you talk evenly. That's one of the things that we're interested in seeing you do, is that each of you contribute evenly to the oral presentation part of your presentation. Just a few notes. Chances are there will be hiccups as we do this Zoom meeting. We're going to try to have it go as smooth as possible. Many of you have been having some data analysis meetings with us on Zooms. You're getting comfortable with sharing your screen and meeting on Zoom. But I think it's important we all just recognize that this is a less than ideal situation and a less than ideal way to present. And we know that, and we know that you know that too. So let's all just sort of be flexible and patient in the Zoom meeting and know that there might be hiccups. We're just looking for you to A, do the best that you can in terms of communicating your results, but we also hope that it's a valuable learning experience for you to be able to talk about your study, share the really neat, interesting studies that you ran, even if you couldn't collect all your data for them, and then to have the experience of answering questions about your projects. In terms of how you'll be evaluated and graded for your oral presentations, it'll be important for you during the oral presentation itself to display a good understanding of your study, that you're able to speak in ways that show you clearly understand the question you asked, why that question was important, what you predicted, that you understand the findings of your study, and what statistical analyses you used and why, and that you draw an accurate conclusion and comprehensively discuss the implications, explanations of those findings. And then another large component of the grade for the oral presentation is how you respond to audience questions. And I want to talk for a few minutes about that. So first, it's not important that you have a perfect answer to every question. So remember that when people ask you questions, and this is especially true of faculty that might ask you questions who are attending the meeting, their goal isn't to pick on you or to trick you or anything like that. Their goal is A, to learn more about your study, and B, often to help you think critically about your study. So that's what we're really looking for in your answers to the questions, that you think about the question that someone has asked you, and then that your answer demonstrates that you have a good understanding of your study and that you can think through important issues related to research design and statistical analyses. If you don't know the answer to a question, that's okay. The important thing is that you think through how to answer that question. Maybe even ask the person who asked the question for some clarification. But you demonstrate that you're thinking critically about your study. So think of those questions and answers as an opportunity to think more about your study, not as like test questions that someone is asking. If you have any questions about the upcoming oral presentations, how it'll work, how to design your PowerPoint, or anything like that, please let your instructor know. We're happy to talk more about it. Again, if you anticipate any difficulties connecting to the meeting, being at the meeting, anything like that, please let us know now rather than later. Again, just as a reminder, the oral presentations will be Wednesday, May 6th at 3 o'clock via Zoom, on the assignment within Canvas, through an announcement and through an email I send out. The link to the Zoom meeting will be provided. Have a good day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you for the oral presentations.